What milestones for you marked the big achievements of 2019?
2019 was a year of high impact for San Antonio in a number of different ways. We're fully into our housing affordability strategy to get ahead of a housing affordability crisis that's been looming in cities nationwide. We are also working hard and have ushered in some great new job creation milestones over the year, including our $1 billion week with a major Toyota supplier network expansion, as well as a company called Navistar, which itself is going to be a huge boon to the San Antonio economy. But two in particular really stand out for me. One is I'm really grateful for the community's work together to adopt our first ever climate action adaptation plan for the city of San Antonio. It was ratified just a few months ago, and we're now into the implementation stages that will really help us deal with the impacts of a changing climate, but also really reap some of the economic rewards of being proactive. The second one is a transformational impact for the city of San Antonio and all of the families here. And that is we launched the Alamo Promise program. As a community, we can ensure that every single Bexar County high school graduate is able to access post-secondary higher education regardless of the circumstances from which they came.
There were years of groundwork that went into that climate plan, months of meetings and research, and now you finally passed it. What happens next, and really is the real work just starting?
Absolutely. The real work is just starting now with the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. The work, as you said, was years in the making, even dating back to 2010, where the community came together and said environmental sustainability and a strong energy system are important to us as a community. So we began the work in earnest on the Climate Action Adaptation Plan literally on day one of my tenure as mayor back in 2017, when the city formally adopted its position in accordance with the cities of the world and the Paris Climate Agenda. And so we have been working with hundreds, thousands of community members across many different sectors to come up with a framework to help us as we make decisions into the future about procurement, about how we build our transportation system, about how we even build facilities in this community. So the work now is to start with each of those individual strategies. We have a couple that are underway right now, including a property assessed clean energy program that would allow low-cost financing for development projects that would encourage the adoption of clean energy technologies. We also have our fleet replacement program, which is now moving towards EV readiness. We also are getting a much stronger position in terms of solar readiness for our buildings that we have here in San Antonio. And then, of course, when it comes to the energy grid and the transportation system, this is a lot of work underway to ensure that we have renewables in our energy portfolio and that we have a transportation system that gets people out of congestion, out of gridlock, and gets moving, which also lowers emissions.
Under your leadership, the city, county, and courts all work together on this comprehensive domestic violence action plan. Where next year do we see that going, and is there a lot more collaboration needed, and how do you want to see the community get involved?
Yeah, well, this is unfortunately domestic violence. We know the rates here in Bexar County are disproportionately high. It's a scourge on this community, has been for a number of years. I'm grateful that my colleagues as well as the community have come together to prioritize this, and we should be proud of that, but we should also take that as a warning that we can't let it slip away in terms of the level of awareness. We've seen tragedies unfold even this week that are unspeakable. And so it's on us first and foremost to make sure that we elevate this conversation and don't let it drop away from the front pages of the media. And make sure that we continue to have people working and volunteering with the organizations that are providing immediate assistance. Then when it comes to the city of San Antonio, we're working on a strategic plan that allows us to identify outcomes that we have our greatest impact in and fund those and provide resources to those organizations in a much more efficient way. And then finally, working together with the county as well as our state representatives to change the law as necessary to protect victims and also to make it harder for perpetrators to recommit crimes against families. So There's a number of different elements that are in place, but I think the most important thing is that we continue to elevate the conversation about how domestic violence is unacceptable in our community.
The period starting with 2010 has been called the decade of downtown. We saw a lot of development and we saw a lot of growth in the city as a whole. What do you see perhaps as focuses for the work over the next decade? Will it be transportation, affordable housing?
Well, I'm looking forward to really invigorating an era of mobility in San Antonio. And that's not just physical mobility, transportation, but it's also socioeconomic mobility. Of course, we have work underway for the comprehensive multimodal transportation system that will be critical, and hopefully voters will approve here at the end of 2020. But we know that transportation is a critical link to socioeconomic mobility, breaking cycles of poverty, making sure that people have an affordable way to get to school, get to work, get to home on time. And so making sure that San Antonio is a place where people can be socioeconomically mobile is a priority for our community, and I think that will mark this incoming era.
Are there any other priorities you have for 2020 or any other message that you want to give San Antonio as we head into the new year?
You know, if you look back at 10 years ago, 2010, and the anticipation we came into 2010 with the great SA 2020 community visioning process where we established where we wanted to be in the future, I think you can look back at this previous decade that we're ending and take some degree of satisfaction that the community was united, even through some turbulence, but was united around some specific goals to really uplift this community. And now we see an urban core that has come to life. We see restaurants in places that we never would have thought before. We see neighborhoods now being involved in the civic engagement policy-making process. We have a lot of things going on that can be credited back to a very focused vision in SA 2020, which also allows us to be very excited and optimistic about going into 2020 now, because we are now on the cusp of some great transformative changes in San Antonio with our transportation system, with housing affordability, with the fact that we're making community-wide investments in education like we never have before. 2020 in this decade will mark the time where we stop saying that we're a city on the rise, and we start realizing some of the privileges and responsibilities of being a city on the forefront of America's urban communities. I'm very excited by that. It's a great opportunity for us to hand the reins off to the next generation at the end of this coming decade in a place where they can be proud of that we've made significant strides in building a city of the future. It's amazing how far we've come in 10 years, and I'm even more excited about the potential that we have in the coming 10 years, knowing that where we are and the groundwork that's been laid.
And I'm just curious, what is one of the things that you're most excited to work on next year? I feel like you love transportation, but what is that?
You know, that's going to be one of the most significant ones. I mean, it sounds boring, but all these different big building blocks that we've been working on, whether it's climate, housing, economic development, you know, transportation, these are all generational changes. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. The transportation system, for instance, we've been working on this for 6 years with the community input process, with SA Tomorrow, and now ultimately Connect SA, and finally into this transit vote. The Climate Action Adaptation Plan, all these things. You know, it would be hard to pick one, but maybe it is finally seeing the first students actually enrolled in college through the Alamo Promise program. Right now we're getting student commitments. We have over 6,000 now, which is far above, and above.
What
Yeah.
we anticipated, right? Yeah.
Yes, much higher. But knowing the impact of that opportunity on an individual family and on aggregate, what that opportunity would mean to the entire community is phenomenal. And I'm excited to see those students finally walk across and finally into the college classroom.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.